The morning shift bell rang across Cathara Station like it had for the past 20 years. Workers from different worlds moved through the corridors, heading to their jobs in the asteroid mines. The Veltar people, with their crystal-like skin, walked slowly but steadily. The Quinn, looking like giant frogs, hopped between the metal walkways. The four-armed Thek carried heavy equipment with ease. Commander Velona stood in the main control room, watching the daily reports come in. 50,000 people called this place home. They had built something special here, a place where different species worked together, far from the politics and wars of the inner worlds. "Another good day," said Kor, the chief engineer. His four arms worked on 3 different control panels at once. "The new mining equipment is working perfectly. We'll exceed our monthly quota by 15%. Velona nodded. Her crystal skin changed color slightly, a sign of contentment among her people. "Send the reports to the Trade Council. They'll be pleased." That's when everything changed. The long-range sensors began screaming. Emergency lights flashed red across every deck. In the space around them, reality seemed to tear open like fabric. Dark shapes poured through the holes in space, ships that looked more like living creatures than machines. "What are those?" whispered Dr. Lyra, the station's head scientist. Her Quinn eyes, designed to see in dark water, could make out details others couldn't. They're alive. The ships were massive, each one bigger than Cathara Station itself. Their hulls pulsed like beating hearts. Strange tentacles writhed from their sides. Biomechanical weapons grew from their surfaces like tumors. These were the Ravager ships, nightmares that had destroyed entire star systems. "Red alert," Velona shouted. "All civilians to emergency shelters, security teams to battle stations." But, even as she gave the orders, she knew it was hopeless. Cathara Station had 3 small patrol ships and some mining vessels with basic weapons. The Ravager fleet had 30 warships, each one capable of cracking a planet. The first Ravager ship moved closer. It was so large it blocked out the stars. A voice came through the communication system. Not words, but something that went straight into their minds. It felt like ice and death and endless hunger. "Surrender," the voice said. "Your organic matter will feed us. Your technology will serve us. You have 72 hours to prepare for harvest." Elder Bryn, an old Quinn philosopher, began to shake. "I've heard stories," he whispered. "They don't just kill you. They consume everything. Your body, your memories, even your soul." The Ravager ship spread out around the station, forming a perfect circle. There was no escape. Long-range communications were being jammed. No one could send for help. Captain Reed of the patrol ship Defender tried to sound brave. "Station command, we're moving to intercept. Maybe we can buy you some time." "Negative, Captain," Velona replied. "Your ships are needed to defend the civilian areas. We'll try to find another way." But there was no other way. Everyone knew it. The first attack came 6 hours later. It wasn't meant to destroy, just to show what the Ravagers could do. A single beam of energy struck the outer mining platform. The entire structure, big enough to house 10,000 people, simply vanished. It didn't explode or break apart. It just stopped existing. Panic spread through the station like wildfire. Families hugged each other in the emergency shelters. Children cried. The elderly prayed to gods from a dozen different worlds. In the control room, Velona and her staff worked desperately. They sent distress signals in every direction, hoping someone might hear them. The nearest military base was 3 weeks away at maximum speed. Even if help was coming, it would arrive too late. "Ma'am," said Communications Officer Vale. "I'm picking up old emergency broadcasts from other systems. The Ravagers hit the Centauri colonies last month. 15 million dead. Before that, it was the Rigel trading posts. They're moving through this entire sector." The hours crawled by. The Ravager ships just waited like predators watching their prey. Sometimes they would move closer just to watch the station's defenders scramble. It was a game to them. Dr. Lyra worked in her lab, trying to find some weakness in the Ravager bioships. "Their hulls regenerate damage," as she reported. "They seem to be part machine, part living tissue. I've never seen anything like it. Core was in the engineering sections trying to boost the station's shields, but the power systems were designed for mining operations, not warfare. We might be able to hold them off for a few hours once they start their real attack, he said. But that's all. 24 hours passed, then 48. The Ravagers didn't attack again, they just waited, letting the fear build. Psychological warfare. They wanted their prey to be broken in spirit before the harvest began. On the second day, the station's children asked their parents hard questions. Why don't the humans help us? Asked a young tech girl. They have the strongest ships. The adults looked at each other uncomfortably. Everyone knew about humans, but they also knew humans didn't get involved in other species' problems. Humans were dangerous, maybe more dangerous than the Ravagers themselves. Humans only care about human interests, explained Elder Bryn. They won't risk themselves for us. But some of the older workers remembered stories. Captain Reed had served in the border wars years ago. I saw a human ship once, he said quietly. It was damaged, drifting after a battle. Even broken, it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. The weapons on that ship could have destroyed our entire system. They say human ships can ignore physics, added Engineer Vale, that they move at impossible speeds, survive direct hits from planet-killer weapons. Stories, said Core. Just stories to scare children. But they weren't just stories, and everyone knew it. The humans had appeared in the galaxy 50 years ago from somewhere beyond the outer rim. They had technology that made no sense. They fought wars with an intensity that scared even the warrior races. And they won. They always won. The problem was, humans didn't care about anyone but humans. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Felona stood in the observation deck, looking out at the Ravager fleet. The bioships were beautiful in their own terrible way, like living nightmares floating in the void. No help is coming, she said to herself. We're going to die here. She was wrong about that. Help was coming, but it wouldn't be the kind of help anyone expected. The second night on Cathara Station was the longest anyone could remember. In the emergency shelters, families huddled together while the Ravager ships waited outside like hungry wolves. Sleep was impossible. Every small sound made people jump. In Shelter 7, Elder Bryn sat with a group of youngsters who couldn't stop asking questions. The old Quinn's webbed hands shook as he tried to comfort them, but his own fear was hard to hide. Tell us about the humans again, whispered a young Veltar girl named Kira. Her crystal skin was pale with terror. Are they really as strong as the stories say? Bryn looked around the shelter. Parents nodded at him. Anything to distract the children from their situation. He cleared his throat and began to speak in his old croaking voice. 50 years ago, the humans came from the dark space beyond the rim, he said. Nobody knew they existed. The first contact was at Proxima Gate, a trading station like ours but bigger. The children moved closer. Even some adults stopped their quiet conversations to listen. A pirate fleet attacked Proxima Gate, Bryn continued. 40 ships, led by the notorious Captain Vex. The station called for help, but the nearest patrol was days away. Everyone thought they were doomed. He paused, remembering. Then a single human ship appeared. Just one ship against 40 pirates. The pirates laughed and demanded surrender. The human captain's response was unusual. What did he say? Asked. Kira, he said, you have 30 seconds to leave. This is your only warning. Bryn's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The pirates attacked. All 40 ships opened fire at once. The human ship. It did something impossible. Core, the four-armed engineer, had been listening from across the shelter. His voice was rough with emotion. I was there, he said quietly, working as a junior mechanic on Proxima Gate. Everyone turned to stare at him. Core had never mentioned being at one of the famous human battles. The human ship was called the Iron Wolf, Core said. It was smaller than most of the pirate vessels, but when the shooting started, he shook his head. It moved like a living thing, faster than physics should allow. The pirates hit it with enough firepower to crack a moon, but it just kept fighting. What happened? Asked a young Thek boy. The human ship tore through them like they were made of paper, Kor replied. Its weapons. I still don't understand how they worked. Beams of pure energy that could bend around asteroids to hit targets. Missiles that seemed to think for themselves. And the ship itself. It took damage that should have killed everyone aboard, but it never stopped fighting. Bryn nodded. The battle lasted 6 days. 6 days of non-stop combat. When it was over, 39 pirate ships were destroyed. One escaped, but only because the humans let it go. Why? Asked Kira. To spread the word, said Dr. Lyra, who had been quiet until now. That's how humans fight. They don't just win, they make sure everyone knows they won. In another shelter, Captain Reed was telling his own story to a group of security officers. They needed to hear it, needed to understand what might be coming. I served in the border wars, Reed said. Saw action at the Battle of Wolf's Den. The enemy had us surrounded. 3 battle fleets against our small patrol group. We were ready to die fighting. The security officers leaned in closer. Outside, one of the Ravager ships moved, its biomechanical hull pulsing with alien life. A human destroyer showed up. Reed continued. The UHS Vengeance, I'll never forget that name. The enemy commander ordered it to surrender or be destroyed. The human response was to open fire immediately. Just one destroyer against 3 fleets? Asked Security Chief Tana. 1 destroyer, Reed confirmed. But it fought like a demon. The thing about human ships, they don't follow normal tactics. They don't retreat when they should. They don't surrender when they're outnumbered. They just fight until either they win or everything around them is dead. Did it win? Asked another officer. Reed was quiet for a long moment. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, 2 of the enemy fleets were completely destroyed. The 3rd fleet ran away. The human ship was so damaged it barely looked like a ship anymore, but it was still fighting. What about the crew? That's the scary part, Reed said. After the battle, we offered medical assistance. The human captain, a woman named Stone, refused. She said her crew was fine, but we could see the damage to their ship. No one should have survived what they went through. Dr. Lyra had moved to another shelter, where the older residents were sharing their own memories. The stories were always the same. Humans appearing suddenly, fighting impossible battles, winning against all odds. They say human ships can travel faster than light without using normal jump drives, said an elderly Thek merchant, that they can appear anywhere, anytime. I heard they don't feel pain like other species, added a Quinn trader, that they can fight even when they're dying. My cousin worked on a salvage crew, said another voice. They found the wreck of a human ship after a battle. The thing had been cut in half, but the crew had sealed themselves in the remaining section and kept fighting for 3 more hours. But not all the stories were about human victories. Some were darker. In the station's main corridor, maintenance worker Vale was talking to anyone who would listen. Humans don't just fight wars, he said. They perfect them. I've seen records from the Terran archives. They've been fighting each other for thousands of years before they ever left their home planet. What do you mean? Asked someone. They had wars that killed millions of their own people, Vale continued. They built weapons that could destroy their entire world. And when they finally achieved peace among themselves, they turned all that knowledge outward. The conversations continued through the night. Stories of human ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Tales of impossible rescues and terrible vengeance. Accounts of human technology that seemed more like magic than science. But every story ended the same way, with the humans disappearing back into the darkness, leaving others to wonder if they had imagined the whole thing. As dawn approached the station's artificial day-night cycle, the mood began to change. The stories had given people something other than fear to think about. Some began to hope. Maybe they'll come, whispered Kira to her parents. Maybe the humans will save us. Her mother held her close. Humans don't save aliens, dear. They only care about other humans. But even as she said it, she found herself looking toward the stars, searching for any sign of salvation. In the command center, Vilona was doing the same thing. The Ravager deadline was approaching fast. In 18 hours, the harvest would begin. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a tiny hope was growing. She had sent distress signals in all directions. Maybe, just maybe, some human ship had heard them. Maybe the stories were true. Maybe help was coming after all. The final day began with silence. The Ravager ships had stopped their slow circling and now hung motionless around Cathara Station, like vultures waiting for death. Their biomechanical hulls pulsed with a sickly green light, and feeding tentacles began to extend toward the station. Commander Vilona stood in the control room watching the countdown timer. 6 hours and 17 minutes remained. Around her, the command staff worked with quiet desperation, but everyone knew it was over. "Any response to our distress signals?" she asked Communications Officer Vale. Vale shook his head. "Nothing. Commander, the nearest military patrol is still 2 weeks out. Even if they left immediately when they received our first message, they won't arrive in time." Dr. Lyra looked up from her sensor readings. "The Ravager ships are moving into harvest formation. They're preparing to dock with our hull. Once those feeding tubes make contact..." She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened next. The Ravagers would drain every living thing on the station, not just killing them, but consuming their memories, their dreams, their very essence. In the emergency shelters, people held each other close. Some prayed. Others cried silently. The children had stopped asking questions. Even they understood that death was coming. Elder Bryn sat with young Kira, the Veltar girl who had asked about humans. Her crystal skin had turned almost gray with fear. "Are you scared?" she whispered to the old Quinn. Bryn nodded honestly. "Yes, child, but sometimes being scared makes us brave." "Will it hurt?" she asked. Before Bryn could answer, every alarm on the station began screaming at once. In the control room, chaos erupted. Sensor readings were going wild, showing impossible energy signatures from deep space. The long-range scanners detected something massive approaching at incredible speed. "What is that?" shouted Vilona over the alarms. Kor's forearms flew across his control panels. "I don't know. The readings don't make sense. Whatever it is, it's moving at 90% of light speed and still accelerating." "That's impossible," said Dr. Lyra. "Nothing can travel that fast in normal space without being torn apart." Vale's communication board lit up like a festival. "Commander, I'm detecting some kind of space distortion 15 million kilometers out. It's like reality is bending." On the main screen, the stars themselves seemed to twist and stretch. Space rippled like water, and something dark began to emerge from the distortion. At first, it looked like a shadow, but as it grew larger, they could see it was a ship. But calling it a ship was like calling a hurricane a breeze. The vessel was enormous, nearly 2 kilometers long and half as wide. Its hull was black as space itself, covered in strange angular patterns that seemed to absorb light. Energy coursed along its surface like captured lightning, and weapon ports dotted its sides like the eyes of some ancient predator. "By the void," whispered Kor. "What is that thing?" The massive ship dropped out of its impossible speed and hung in space like a sleeping giant. For a moment, everything was quiet. Even the Ravager ships seemed stunned by its sudden appearance. Then the newcomers' weapons powered up. The energy readings were beyond anything in their databases. The station's sensors couldn't even measure the power levels they were detecting. It was like trying to count the stars in the sky. A voice came through the communication system. Calm, human, and terrifyingly casual. "Cathara Station, this is Captain Stone of the UHS Retribution. We received your distress call. Maintain safe distance while we clear the area." Vilona's crystal skin flashed through a dozen colors: shock, fear, hope, and disbelief all at once. "UHS Retribution, this is Commander Vilona. Are you here to help us?" "Affirmative, Station. Stay in your current position and keep your shields up. This might get messy." The Ravager fleet finally reacted to the human ship's presence. The biomechanical vessels turned toward the Retribution, their organic weapons charging with malevolent energy. 30 massive warships against one human vessel. The Ravagers opened fire first. Streams of bioplasma erupted from their living cannons, energy beams that could melt through planetary crust. The combined firepower of the entire fleet focused on the human ship, enough destructive force to crack a moon in half. The Retribution's shields absorbed every shot without even flickering. "Interesting," came Captain Stone's voice, still perfectly calm. "Tactical, begin mapping their weapon systems. Science, I want full scans of their biomechanical technology. Let's see what these things are made of." Then the human ship fired back. What happened next defied everything the survivors thought they knew about space combat. The Retribution's weapons didn't just shoot energy beams or missiles, they launched impossibilities. Streams of contained antimatter reached out across space, twisting and bending to follow their targets. When they hit the Ravager ships, entire sections simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed or vaporized, but removed from reality itself. Gravitational warheads exploded near the bioships, creating miniature black holes that crushed their living. Hulls like paper. The Ravagers' regeneration abilities meant nothing against weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. "My God," breathed Dr. Lyra, watching the sensor readings. "Those weapons, they're manipulating space-time itself." But the most terrifying thing wasn't the weapons, it was how the human ship moved. The Retribution danced through space like it weighed nothing, accelerating and turning at speeds that should have liquefied any crew. It seemed to ignore momentum, inertia, and every other law that governed how things moved through the universe. "How are they doing this?" asked Vale, his voice barely a whisper. On the main screen, they watched one of the largest Ravager ships, a bioform the size of a small city, attempt to ram the human vessel. The Retribution simply wasn't there when the collision should have happened. It had moved sideways in a way that hurt to watch, as if it had stepped out of normal space for a moment. The human ship's counterattack was surgical. A single beam of coherent energy struck the Ravager bioform's central nerve cluster. The massive creature convulsed once and went dark, drifting lifeless through space. "Tango down," came a new voice from the Retribution, one of Captain Stone's officers. "That's 5 confirmed kills. Remaining hostiles are attempting to regroup." "Negative," replied Stone. "Don't let them reorganize. Blake, take us through their formation. Harper, target their command ship, the big one with the crown-like projections." "Aye, Captain. Torres, give me full power to forward weapons." The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for another hour. But it wasn't really a battle. It was an extermination. The Ravager ships, apex predators that had consumed entire star systems, found themselves helpless against human technology. Their bioweapons couldn't penetrate the Retribution's shields. Their regeneration meant nothing against weapons that prevented healing. Their superior numbers became a disadvantage as the human ship used their own formation against them. One by one, the Ravager vessels went dark. As the last enemy ship exploded in a burst of biomechanical gore, the survivors on Cathara Station sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed the impossible, a single human warship destroying an entire fleet that could have cracked planets. "All clear, Cathara Station," came Captain Stone's voice. "Threat neutralized. We'll remain in system for 48 hours to ensure no stragglers return." Commander Valona found her voice somehow. "Captain Stone, thank you. We owe you our lives." "No thanks necessary," Stone replied, his tone becoming colder. The Ravagers were a threat to human interest in this sector. This was not altruism. Something about those words sent a chill through everyone listening. They had been saved, but the way Stone said it made them wonder exactly why. The silence after the battle was more terrifying than the fighting itself. Where 30 Ravager warships had floated like living nightmares, now there was only empty space and drifting debris. The UHS Retribution hung motionless among the wreckage, its black hull gleaming with contained energy. Commander Valona stared at the main screen, trying to process what she had just witnessed. In 2 hours, a single human ship had completely destroyed a fleet that could have wiped out entire star systems. "Commander," whispered Communications Officer Vale. "I'm detecting 2 more ships decloaking near the asteroid field." The sensors showed 2 more human vessels materializing out of nothingness. They had been there all along, invisible and waiting. The first was sleek and deadly, the UHS Vengeance, a destroyer that moved like a hunting cat. The second was smaller but somehow more menacing, the UHS Fury, a corvette that radiated controlled violence. "They were watching," breathed Dr. Lyra. "The whole time they were watching." Captain Stone's voice came through the communicator, calm as always. "Station Command, this is Stone. We're conducting post-battle analysis. Maintain your current position." "Captain," Valona replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "How long have your ships been in this system?" There was a pause. When Stone answered, his tone was different, colder, more clinical. "Long enough, Commander. Long enough." In the emergency shelters, people were celebrating. Children laughed and cried at the same time. Families hugged each other, unable to believe they were still alive. But the older residents, those who had heard the stories about humans, were quieter. They understood that being saved by humans came with a price. Elder Bryn sat in Shelter 7, watching young Kira dance with joy. Her crystal skin was bright with happiness, but Bryn's old eyes were worried. "Why aren't you celebrating?" asked Kira, noticing his expression. "Child," Bryn said gently, "when wolves save sheep from other wolves, the sheep must ask themselves, what do the wolves want in return?" Back in the control room, the command staff was analyzing the battle recordings. What they discovered made their relief turn to unease. "Look at this," said Kor, his forearms working multiple displays. The human weapons didn't just destroy the Ravager ships. They prevented them from sending any signals back to their fleet. Dr. Lyra studied the energy patterns. "These reading, the humans were jamming all subspace communications before they even fired their first shot. The Ravagers couldn't call for help or report what they found here." "Why would that matter?" asked Vale. "Because," said Valona slowly, "it means this wasn't a rescue mission. It was a trap." The truth began to emerge as they studied the sensor logs. The human ships had been positioned in the system for days, maybe weeks. They had watched the Ravagers arrive. They had watched the siege begin. They had waited while 50,000 people lived in terror, wondering if they would die. "They used us as bait," whispered Vale. Captain Stone's communication channel crackled to life again. This time, they could hear other voices in the background, his crew coordinating their activities. "Blake, what's the status on the biosamples?" Stone asked. "Collected and secured, Captain," came a female voice. "Dr. Torres is already running analysis on their regeneration systems." "Good. Harper, I want full scans of their weapon technology. This was our best chance to study Ravager capabilities in live combat." "Already on it, sir." The way they adapted their bioplasma to different shield frequencies was fascinating. The people on Cathara Station listened to this exchange with growing horror. The humans were talking about the battle like it was a scientific experiment. They had turned a life or death struggle into a research opportunity. "Captain Stone?" Valona called out, her crystal skin flashing angry red. "Are you saying you deliberately let the Ravagers attack us?" Another pause. When Stone replied, his voice held no emotion at all. "Commander, the Ravagers have been a problem. For human expansion in this sector, we needed to understand their capabilities and weaknesses. Your distress situation provided an excellent testing ground." "Testing ground?" Valona's voice rose. 50,000 people could have died. "But they didn't," Stone replied matter-of-factly. "We calculated acceptable risk levels and determined the probability of station survival until our intervention. The math worked out. In engineering, Kor was studying the human ship's combat performance. What he found made his forearms tremble. "These readings can't be right," he muttered. "What is it?" asked his assistant. "The human ship," Kor said slowly. "During the battle, it was pulling G-forces that should have killed everyone aboard. No biological creature can survive those acceleration levels. He pulled up more data. And look at this. When that Ravager ship tried to ram them, the Retribution moved in a way that violates basic physics. It's like they stepped outside normal space-time. The assistant studied the readings. Maybe their artificial gravity technology is more advanced than we thought? No, Kor shook his head. This is something else. Something impossible. Meanwhile, the human ships continued their post-battle activities. Scanner sweeps revealed they were collecting every piece of Ravager debris, analyzing the biomechanical technology, and studying the aliens' tactics and weaknesses. Dr. Lyra monitored their communications, growing more disturbed by what she heard. Subject 7 shows interesting adaptation patterns, came Dr. Torres's voice from the Retribution. The biohull tried to evolve resistance to our antimatter weapons in real time. Noted, replied Stone. That confirms the intelligence reports. About their rapid adaptation abilities. We'll need to account for that in future engagements. Future engagements? Lyra whispered to herself. The conversation continued. Captain, I'm reading similar biomechanical signatures from 12 other systems in this sector, reported Officer Harper. If the Ravagers follow standard pack hunting behavior, those systems are likely next on their list. Excellent, Stone replied. Prepare course calculations for all 12 locations. We'll set up monitoring stations and wait for the next attack. Wait for the next attack? Velona repeated, having overheard the transmission. Captain, you could warn those systems. You could save them. Negative, Commander. Stone's voice was ice cold. Those systems will provide additional research opportunities. We need more data on Ravager attack patterns and defensive adaptations. The full horror of the situation hit everyone at once. The humans weren't heroes who had come to save them. They were scientists who had turned an entire sector of space into their personal laboratory. They would let the Ravagers attack system after system, using the suffering of innocent people to gather information. You're monsters, Velona whispered. We're pragmatists, Stone corrected. The Ravagers are a threat to human expansion. Understanding them completely is worth any temporary suffering by non-human populations. In the shelters, word was spreading about what the humans really were. The celebration stopped. Parents held their children closer, understanding that while they had been saved from one nightmare, they might have fallen into another. Elder Bryn looked at young Kira, who was no longer dancing. What's wrong? She asked, sensing the change in mood. Nothing, child. Bryn lied. Just be grateful we're alive. But as he said it, he wondered if being alive under human protection was really something to be grateful for. The wolves had saved them from other wolves, but now the sheep belonged to the pack. The next 48 hours passed like a fever dream. The 3 human ships remained in the system, their dark hulls floating silently among the debris of the Ravager fleet. On Cathara Station, life slowly returned to normal, but everything had changed. Commander Velona stood in her office, staring out at the human vessels. Her crystal skin flickered between colors, relief, anger, fear, and something else she couldn't name. They were alive, but at what cost? Dr. Lyra knocked on her door and entered without waiting for permission. Her Quinn features were drawn with exhaustion and worry. Commander, I've been analyzing the human communication logs, she said, setting down a data pad. What I found, you need to see this. Velona picked up the pad and read silently. Her skin went pale crystal white. They've been tracking the Ravager fleet for 6 months, she whispered. They knew exactly when and where the attack would happen. That's not the worst part, Lyra continued. Look at page 3. Velona scrolled down and found a detailed analysis of Cathara Station. Population numbers, defensive capabilities, estimated survival time under siege. The humans had calculated everything down to the hour. They knew we would last exactly 71 hours and 43 minutes, Velona read aloud. Margin of error, plus or minus 2 hours. They let us suffer for exactly the right amount of time, Lyra said bitterly. Long enough to gather maximum data on Ravager psychological warfare, but not long enough for us to actually die. In the engineering section, Kor was making his own disturbing discoveries. His forearms worked frantically over a technical analysis that made no sense. "Impossible," he muttered for the 100th time. "This is completely impossible." His assistant, a young Thek named Nex, looked over his shoulder. "What did you find now?" "The human ship's performance during the battle," Kor explained. "I've run the calculations a dozen times. The acceleration forces they sustained should have turned their crew into liquid. But they were talking calmly throughout the entire fight. Maybe they have better inertial dampeners than we thought." Kor shook his head. "No technology can overcome basic physics like this. Unless—" He paused, a horrible thought forming. "Unless they're not entirely biological anymore." The words hung in the air like a curse. Everyone had heard rumors about human augmentation, about soldiers who had replaced parts of themselves with machines. But to survive what the Retribution had done, they would need to be more machine than flesh. "What kind of people do that to themselves?" whispered Nex. "The kind who value victory over everything else," Kor replied. Meanwhile, in the emergency shelters, Elder Bryn was telling the children a different kind of story. Young Kira and the others sat in a circle listening to his old voice with wide eyes. "Long ago," Bryn began, "there was a village that lived in fear of wolves. Every night the wolves would come and take someone away. The villagers prayed for salvation." "Did it come?" asked Kira. "Yes," Bryn nodded. "A pack of even stronger wolves arrived. They drove away the first wolves and saved the village." "That's good, right?" said a young Thek boy. "The stronger wolves told the villagers they were now safe," Bryn continued. "But they also said the village now belonged to them. The villagers could live and work, but only as long as they served their new masters." "Were the villagers happy?" asked Kira. Bryn looked at her with sad, ancient eyes. "They were alive, child. Sometimes that has to be enough." Captain Stone's voice suddenly echoed through the station's communication system. "Attention, Cathara Station. This is Captain Stone of the UHS Retribution. I'm addressing all residents." Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. In the control room, Velona activated the station-wide broadcast so every person could hear. "The Ravager threat to this system has been eliminated," Stone announced. "However, our analysis indicates this sector remains unstable. Additional threats may emerge." He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a weight that made everyone shiver. "Therefore, this sector is now under informal human protection. Any future threats will be dealt with by human forces. In exchange, we expect full cooperation with our research and security operations." "What does that mean?" whispered someone in the crowd that had gathered in the main corridor. Stone continued as if he had heard the question. "Cathara Station will serve as a monitoring post for this region. You will report any unusual activity to human forces immediately. You will provide assistance to human research teams when requested. You will not interfere with human operations." Commander Velona activated her communication link. "Captain Stone, are you saying we no longer have autonomy over our own station?" "You have the autonomy to choose," Stone replied coldly. "Accept human protection and live under our terms, or reject it and face whatever threats emerge from the dark on your own." It wasn't really a choice, and everyone knew it. Without human protection, the next Ravager fleet would consume them all. With it, they became subjects of a power they didn't understand and couldn't resist. "We understand," Velona said quietly. "Excellent," Stone replied. "Human research teams will arrive within the month. You will provide them with full access to your facilities and complete cooperation with their studies." The transmission ended, leaving the station in heavy silence. Dr. Lyra found Velona in her office an hour later, staring out at the stars. "Commander, what have we done?" "What we had to do," Velona replied. "We're alive. Our families are alive. Our children will grow up." "But what kind of life will they have?" Lyra asked. "What kind of future are we giving them?" Before Velona could answer, the human ships began to move. The UHS Vengeance and UHS Fury disappeared first, simply vanishing. As their cloaking systems engaged, the massive Retribution hung in space for a moment longer like a dark promise, then jumped to faster-than-light speed in a burst of twisted spacetime. They were gone, but their presence remained like a shadow over the station. In the days that followed, life on Cathara Station slowly returned to normal. The mines reopened. Trade resumed. Children went back to school. But everyone understood that their world had changed forever. They were no longer free. They were protected. Young Kira found Elder Bryn in the observation deck a week later, looking out at the stars. "Are you still scared?" she asked. Bryn considered the question carefully. "No, child, I'm not scared anymore." "Good," she smiled. "But I'm not happy either," he continued gently. "When you're no longer afraid of the dark, it's often because something darker is watching over you." Kira looked puzzled, too young to understand the full meaning of his words. "Will the humans come back?" she asked. Bryn nodded slowly. "They'll always come back now. That's what protection means." As he spoke, the long-range sensors detected a brief energy signature at the edge of the system. Probably a cloaked human ship, watching and waiting. The Guardians were still there, invisible but present. The people of Cathara Station were safe. They would always be safe now. They just had to remember never to ask what that safety would cost them in the end. Commander Marcus Reed stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the last god die. The massive energy being that had once called itself Emperor Vex twisted and screamed as the quantum disruptor tore through its essence. For 300 years, this creature had ruled over 17 star systems. It had destroyed entire planets with a thought. Billions of aliens had worshipped it as a living god. Now it was breaking apart like smoke in the wind. "Direct hit confirmed," reported Lieutenant Davis from the weapons station, entity readings dropping to 0. Reed nodded but said nothing. Around him the bridge crew celebrated. They had every right to be happy. Today marked the end of the God War. The last of the ethereal dominion had fallen. The ethereals had been pure energy beings, ancient and powerful beyond imagination. They had appeared in the galaxy over 1,000 years ago and declared themselves gods. Most species had simply accepted this. The ethereals could bend reality, destroy stars, and create life from nothing. What else could they be but gods? Humanity had a different opinion. "They're just energy patterns," human scientists had said. "Complex ones, but still just patterns, and any pattern can be disrupted." It had taken 2 centuries of research, but humanity had done it. They built weapons that could hurt gods, quantum disruptors that could scatter energy beings, reality anchors that prevented them from changing the laws of physics, plasma cannons that burned hot enough to damage their essence. The other species in the galaxy had watched in terror and amazement as humans went to war with beings they considered divine. "Sir," called Communications Officer Park. "We're getting a priority transmission from Outpost 7. It's unusual." Reed turned away from the viewport where god dust still sparkled in the darkness. "Put it through." The hologram showed a middle-aged woman with dirt on her face and fear in her eyes. Reed recognized her as Colony Administrator Beth Cole from the mining outpost near the edge of human space. "Commander Reed," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank God you're alive. We need help, but it's not what you think. We have pirates, yes, but they're... God help us, they're not normal pirates." Reed frowned. "Explain." "They took our mining station 3 days ago. Their leader, he calls himself Kane. Commander, this man isn't just dangerous. He's something else. Something wrong." Cole's image flickered as the transmission weakened. "He doesn't want money or resources. He wants to experiment on us." "How many hostages?" Reed asked. 200 civilians, mostly miners and their families." Cole's voice broke. "Commander, you have to understand. This Kane person, he's human. But he talks about humans like we're some kind of predator species. He says we proved it by killing gods." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. "Where are you transmitting from?" "Hidden shelter beneath the main colony. Kane knows we're here. He's letting us broadcast. He wants you to come. Specifically, you. He knows about the God War, about what you did." The transmission cut to static. Reed stared at the empty hologram projector. Around him, the bridge had gone quiet. The celebration was over. "Sir?" Davis asked. "Orders?" Reed thought about it. They had just finished the greatest war in galactic history. His crew was tired. The ship needed repairs. But 200 civilians were in danger. More than that, something about this felt wrong. Pirates usually wanted quick money and a fast escape. They didn't take hostages for experiments. And why would this Kane person specifically want to meet him? "Set course for Outpost 7, Reed ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir, maybe we should call for backup," suggested Park. "If this Kane is as dangerous as the administrator says." "We're the closest ship," Reed replied. "Those people don't have time to wait for reinforcements." As the Defiance jumped to hyperspace, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what Kane wanted. 2 days later, they arrived at Outpost 7. The mining colony orbited a dead planet, its surface scarred by centuries of resource extraction. The colony itself was a collection of habitat domes connected by transit tubes. Everything looked normal from space. "Scanning for life signs," reported Science Officer Kim. "I'm detecting approximately 200 humans in the main habitat dome. No other ships in the area." "Where are the pirates?" Reed asked. "Unknown, sir. I'm only reading human life signs." Reed felt the chill again. "Prepare a Marine squad. I want full combat gear and non-lethal options ready." "Sir?" Kim said, looking up from her scanner. "I'm getting another transmission from the colony. Put it through." This time the hologram showed a man Reed had never seen before. He was tall and thin, with ordinary brown hair and a face that would be easy to forget. But his eyes were different. They were completely calm, like still water. "Commander Reed," the man said in a pleasant voice. "Welcome to my little experiment. I'm Kane. Release the hostages," Reed said immediately. Kane smiled. It was a normal smile, friendly even. Somehow that made it worse. "Of course," Kane said. "But first, I want to show you something interesting. Did you know that humans are the only species in the galaxy that has ever killed a god?" "What's your point?" "My point," Kane said, still smiling, "is that the other species got it wrong. They thought the ethereals were dangerous because they were gods. But they weren't dangerous because they were gods. They were dangerous because they were predators. And now they're dead, because they met better predators." Reed felt his stomach turn. "You're talking about humans. I'm talking about us," Kane corrected. "We're not the heroes of this story, Commander. We're the monsters. The ethereals killed out of arrogance. We kill out of necessity. Which one is more frightening?" "Release the hostages and we can discuss philosophy later." Kane laughed. It was a genuine laugh full of real amusement. "Oh, Commander, you still don't understand. The hostages aren't prisoners, they're test subjects, and you're the control group." The transmission ended. Reed stood in the sudden silence, feeling like the universe had shifted around him. They had come to fight pirates and rescue civilians. But Kane wasn't a pirate. He was something much worse, and Reed was beginning to suspect that this was just the beginning. "Sir?" Davis asked quietly. "What are your orders?" Reed looked at the mining colony floating peacefully in space. 200 innocent people were inside, at the mercy of a man who thought humanity were monsters. The worst part was, Reed couldn't immediately prove him wrong. "Prepare for boarding operations," Reed said finally, "and double the Marine escort. I have a feeling we're going to need it." The docking bay of Outpost 7 was completely silent when Reed and his Marines stepped off the shuttle. Their boots echoed on the metal floor as they moved forward, weapons ready. "This is wrong," whispered Sergeant Brooks, the squad leader. "Where is everyone?" Reed checked his scanner. "Life signs are all coming from the main habitat dome, 2 levels down." The Marines spread out in formation. Reed had brought 12 of his best soldiers, all veterans of the God War. They had faced energy beings that could rewrite reality. A human pirate should be easy. But Reed couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about this would be easy. They moved through empty corridors. The colony's lights were on, air was flowing, everything looked normal. but there were no people anywhere. "Commander," called Marine Lopez from up ahead. "You need to see this." Reed jogged forward and stopped cold. On the wall, written in what looked like dried blood, were words in perfect English. "Welcome to the real war." "Sir," Brooks said, studying the writing. "This blood, it's fresh, maybe an hour old." Reed's comm unit crackled to life. Kane's voice came through, still calm and pleasant. "I hope you're enjoying the tour, Commander. I've prepared some demonstrations for you, educational ones." "Where are the hostages?" Reed demanded. "Safe, for now. But I want to show you something. First, take the elevator to level 3, Habitat Section C." The comm went silent. Reed looked at his Marines. They were good soldiers, but he could see the worry in their eyes. This wasn't like any mission they had been on before. "Stay alert," Reed ordered. "And remember, he's just human." They took the elevator down. The doors opened to reveal another, empty corridor, but this one was different. The walls were covered with pictures, hundreds of them. Reed stepped closer and felt his blood turn cold. The pictures showed scenes from the God War. Human ships attacking ethereal beings, planets burning, cities destroyed. But these weren't official military photos. These were personal pictures, taken by someone who had been there. He was in the war, Brooks realized. Kane was a soldier. Not just any soldier, Reed said, studying the images. He recognized several battle scenes. He was at the siege of Altair, the Battle of Dead Man's Nebula, the final strike at the ethereal throne world. That meant Kane had been fighting gods for years. He had seen the worst of the war. They moved deeper into the section. Finally, they found the first person. A miner sat in a chair in the middle of a room. He was alive but staring straight ahead, not moving. Reed approached carefully. "Sir? Can you hear me?" The miner's eyes focused on Reed. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "He made me choose," the miner said. "My wife or my daughter. He said I could only save one. I had to choose." Reed felt sick. "Where are they now?" "Safe. Both safe. He didn't hurt them. But he made me choose. And I did. I chose my daughter." The miner started crying. What kind of man chooses between his wife and child? Before Reed could answer, Kane's voice came from speakers hidden in the walls. "The kind of man who wants to survive," Kane said. "The same kind of man who builds weapons to kill gods." "Interesting, isn't it?" Reed pulled out his comm unit. "Show yourself, Kane." "I'm right here, Commander." Reed spun around. Kane stood in the doorway behind them, completely relaxed. He was exactly as he had appeared in the hologram. Average height, ordinary face, calm eyes. But now Reed could see something else. Kane moved wrong, too smooth, too controlled, like a predator pretending to be prey. "Weapons down," Kane said pleasantly. "Take him," Reed ordered. The Marines opened fire immediately. Stun blasts filled the air. But Kane was already moving. Reed had seen many things in the God War. He had watched ethereals dodge energy blasts that moved at light speed. But he had never seen a human move like Kane. Kane flowed between the stun blasts like water. He picked up a metal pipe from the floor and used it to deflect shots back at the Marines. 3 soldiers went down in the first 5 seconds. Sergeant Brooks tried to tackle Kane. Kane stepped aside and struck Brooks in the neck with surgical precision. Brooks collapsed, paralyzed but alive. "Fascinating," Kane said, not even breathing. "Hard. You trained these men to fight gods, but gods don't understand human anatomy." "I do." Reed drew his sidearm and fired. Kane moved his head exactly far enough to let the blast pass by his ear. "Your turn, Commander," Kane said. Reed had fought in hundreds of battles. He had stared down beings that could destroy planets. But, facing Kane, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Kane moved forward, still holding the metal pipe. Reed fired again and again. Kane avoided every shot with minimal effort, like he knew where Reed would aim before Reed did. You know what I learned in the God War?" Kane asked, still walking forward. "I learned that humans win because we're willing to do anything. Absolutely anything. The ethereals had power, but they had limits, rules, morals. We don't. Kane was close now. Reed could see his eyes clearly. They weren't crazy eyes. They weren't angry eyes. They were completely, perfectly calm. You proved it, Kane continued. You killed beings that entire civilizations worshipped as gods. You didn't hesitate, you didn't feel guilty. You just did what needed to be done. Reed backed against the wall. You're insane. Kane smiled. No, Commander. I'm honest. The galaxy thinks you're heroes, but I know what you really are. You're apex, predators, the most dangerous species that has ever existed. Kane raised the pipe. Reed closed his eyes, waiting for the blow. It never came. Reed opened his eyes. Kane was lowering the pipe. But I'm not going to kill you, Kane said. That would be too easy. Instead, I'm going to prove my point. I'm going to show the galaxy what humans really are, and you're going to help me. Kane stepped back. Your Marines are alive. The hostages are unharmed for now. But this was just the beginning, Commander. The real war is about to start. Kane walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the corridor. Reed stood there shaking. His best Marines were unconscious around him. A madman had just played with them like toys. And the worst part was, Reed wasn't sure Kane was wrong about humans. Maybe they really were monsters. The thought terrified him more than any god ever had. 3 weeks had passed since the encounter at Outpost 7. Reed had filed his report, but nobody believed it. A single human had defeated 12 Marines? It sounded impossible. Then the attacks began. Reed stood in the war room aboard the Defiance, staring at a holographic map of human space. Red dots marked the locations of Kane's strikes. 7 colonies in 3 weeks. All human settlements. Another transmission just came in, reported Park. Colony New Haven, same pattern as the others. Reed rubbed his tired eyes. Show me. The hologram displayed the aftermath of Kane's latest visit. New Haven had been a peaceful farming colony, with 800 residents. Now, half of them were dead and the survivors were in shock. But Kane hadn't just killed randomly. His attacks followed a twisted pattern. At each colony, Kane had created impossible situations. He would gather civilians in groups and force them to make terrible choices. Save 10 strangers or save your family. Share limited food or let children starve. Fight your neighbors for supplies or watch everyone die slowly. The worst part was that Kane always kept his word. If people made the choices he demanded, he let them live. If they refused to choose, everyone died. He's proving a point, Reed said quietly. Sir? Park asked. Every choice he forces them to make shows human nature at its worst. He wants to prove that humans are monsters. Intelligence Officer Taylor stepped forward with a data pad. Commander, we've been analyzing the pattern of attacks. Kane isn't choosing colonies randomly. He's selecting communities known for being peaceful, religious groups, pacifist settlements, humanitarian colonies. Reed understood immediately. He's targeting the best of humanity to prove they're just as bad as everyone else. There's more, Taylor continued. We've intercepted several of his broadcasts to other species. He's sending them recordings of what happens at each colony. He's showing them humans at their worst. Reed felt his stomach drop. The galactic community was already nervous about humanity after the God War. If other species started believing that humans were naturally violent, his comm system activated. Kane's face appeared on the main screen. Hello again, Commander, Kane said with his usual pleasant smile. I hope you've been watching my work. Educational, isn't it? You're a monster, Reed said. Kane laughed. No, Commander. I'm a teacher, and humanity is my subject. Behind Kane, Reed could see what looked like a laboratory. Screens showed data, charts and recordings from his attacks. Let me share some interesting statistics, Kane continued. In every colony I visited, humans have chosen survival over morality within 36 hours. Every single time. Doesn't matter if they're farmers, priests, or teachers. When faced with death, humans become predators. You're forcing them into impossible situations. I'm creating natural selection, Cain corrected, the same process that made humans strong enough to kill gods. Do you want to know what I learned during the God War, Commander? Reed said nothing, but Cain continued anyway. I learned that humans don't win because we're brave or noble. We win because we're willing to sacrifice anything to survive. Other species have honor codes, religious beliefs, moral limits. We don't. That's our strength. The screen shifted to show recordings from Cain's attacks. Reed watched in horror as ordinary people turned on each other when faced with starvation, neighbors fighting over water, parents abandoning children to save themselves. The ethereals ruled for 1,000 years, Cain said, but they had weaknesses. They believed some things were sacred. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. Humans don't have those limitations. Reed wanted to argue, but the evidence was right in front of him. In every recording, humans had chosen survival over everything else. You're sick, Reed said. I'm honest, Cain replied. I'm showing the galaxy what you really are. What we really are. The greatest predators ever born. The transmission changed, again. Now it showed ships, dozens of them, all flying human designs but with different markings. You see, Commander, I'm not alone anymore. Other humans are starting to understand what I'm teaching. Veterans from the God War mostly. They remember what it felt like to be apex predators. Reed recognized some of the ships. They belonged to human mercenary groups and private military companies. You're building an army. I'm gathering like-minded individuals, Cain said. People who understand that mercy is weakness, that morality is luxury, that survival is everything. The screen split to show multiple colonies under attack simultaneously. Cain's followers were spreading his philosophy across human space. The alien species are starting to notice, Cain continued. They're remembering that humans killed their gods. They're wondering if they should be grateful or terrified. Reed's blood ran cold. He had been so focused on stopping Cain that he hadn't considered the bigger picture. Cain wasn't just attacking human colonies. He was systematically destroying humanity's reputation in the galaxy. What do you want? Reed asked. Cain's smile grew wider. I want truth, Commander. I want the galaxy to see humans as we really are, not as heroes or liberators, but as the most dangerous species alive. And then what? Then we'll see what happens when the prey tries to fight the predator, Cain said. It should be quite educational. The transmission ended. Reed stood in silence, his mind racing. Cain was right about one thing. Every species in the galaxy owed their freedom to humanity's victory over the ethereals. But if they started seeing humans as a threat instead of saviors... Sir, Park said quietly, we're receiving priority transmissions from several alien governments. They're concerned about recent human activities. Reed closed his eyes. It was starting. The galaxy was beginning to fear humanity. His comm system activated again. This time it was Admiral Foster from Fleet Command. Reed, Foster said, his face grim. We have a problem. 3 alien species have formally requested that we explain recent human actions. They're asking if the attacks on our own colonies represent official human policy. It's one madman with followers, Reed replied. Maybe. But the aliens don't know that. They see humans attacking humans and they remember that we're the species that killed gods. They're starting to think maybe they should deal with us before we deal with them. Reed felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. Cain had created exactly the scenario he wanted. Humanity was becoming isolated, feared, viewed as monsters. And the worst part was, Reed wasn't entirely sure Cain was wrong. Maybe humans really were monsters. Maybe they had just been good at hiding it until now. The real war was about to begin. Not against gods this time, against everyone else. The Galactic Peace Summit was supposed to be humanity's moment of triumph. Representatives from 47 species had gathered on the neutral station of Unity Point to celebrate the end of the ethereal dominion and plan for the future. Reed, stood in the observation deck, watching alien delegates arrive. The Velkari, who had been slaves for 3 centuries, came in their finest ceremonial robes. The Threnody brought gifts of rare crystals. Even the proud Caesarian Empire had sent their crown prince. All of them had come to thank humanity for killing the gods. "Beautiful sight, isn't it?" said Ambassador Wright, the senior human diplomat. "After all these years of war, finally we have peace." Reed nodded, but he couldn't shake his unease. Kane had been quiet for 2 weeks. No attacks, no transmissions, no sign of his growing army. It felt wrong. "Security is tight," Wright continued. 300 guards from 12 different species. Nothing can go wrong here. That was when Reed's comm unit buzzed with an emergency signal. "Commander," came Lieutenant Davis's voice from the Defiance. "We're detecting multiple human vessels approaching the station. They're not responding to hails." Reed's blood went cold. "How many ships?" 15, all armed. And sir, one of them is broadcasting Kane's signature." Reed ran toward the security center, but he was already too late. The first explosion rocked the station. Emergency alarms began screaming as the lights flickered. Through the observation windows, Reed could see Kane's ships attacking the station's defense platforms. But this wasn't a normal attack. Kane's ships were targeting specific sections, creating fear and chaos without destroying vital areas. He wanted the station intact. Reed reached the security center just as Kane's face appeared on every screen throughout the station. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane said with his usual calm smile, "welcome to the truth about humanity." Throughout the station, alien delegates stopped and stared at the screens. Many of them had never seen a human before except in recordings of the God War. "You've gathered here today to celebrate," Kane continued, "to thank the species that liberated you from divine tyranny. But I have a gift for you. I want to show you what your liberators really are." Reed tried to override the transmission, but Kane had taken control of all communication systems. "Observe," Kane said. What happened next was pure horror. Kane's followers had infiltrated the station disguised as maintenance workers, security guards, and even some diplomatic staff. At Kane's signal, they revealed themselves and began systematically taking hostages. But they didn't just grab random people. They had studied each alien species, learned their weaknesses, their fears, their cultural taboos. The Velkari delegates were separated from their ritual companions, causing them psychological agony. The Threnody were exposed to bright lights that damaged their sensitive eyes. "Stop this," Reed shouted into his comm, knowing Kane could hear him. Kane's image on the screen turned toward Reed as if he could see him. "But Commander, this is the educational part." What Kane did next broke Reed's heart. Kane had captured Ambassador Wright and several other human diplomats, but instead of harming them, he gave them a choice. They could save themselves by pointing out which alien delegates were most important, making them priority targets. Or they could refuse and watch as Kane's people randomly killed hostages. Wright was a good man. He had dedicated his life to peace and diplomacy. But faced with the choice between betraying the aliens or watching innocents die, he broke. "The Caesarian prince," Wright whispered. He's the most important politically." Kane smiled. "Thank you for your honesty." Within minutes, Kane's people had surrounded the Caesarian delegation. The prince, a being that looked like a golden insect, trembled as human soldiers pointed weapons at him. "You see?" Kane broadcast to the entire station. "Your heroes, your liberators, will sacrifice anyone to save themselves, just like they sacrificed entire ethereal civilizations to win their war." Reed watched in horror as the same scene played out across the station. Human diplomats, faced with impossible choices, began identifying which aliens were most valuable as hostages. Scientists pointed out military leaders. Trade officials identified economic targets. Every choice proved Kane's point about human nature. "Please," came a transmission from the Velkari ambassador. "We came here in peace. We trusted you." Kane's image addressed the alien directly. Trust is dangerous when dealing with predators. Humans didn't free you out of kindness. They freed you because the ethereals stood in their way. Now that the gods are dead, what do you think will happen next? Reed realized Cain's true plan. This wasn't just about taking hostages or causing chaos. Cain was systematically destroying every relationship humanity had built with other species. The alien delegates, watching humans betray them in real time, began to panic. The Threnody ambassador sent an emergency transmission to his fleet. The Velkari representatives huddled together, speaking in terrified whispers about human treachery. "You're destroying everything," Reed said into his comm. Cain's image smiled. "I'm revealing everything. Tell me, Commander, if you had to choose between saving 1 human or 10 aliens, what would you choose?" Reed opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. The horrible truth was, he wasn't sure. "That's what I thought," Cain said. The situation got worse. Cain's followers began forcing human and alien delegates to compete for limited resources. Food, water, medicine, everything became a choice between human survival and alien survival, and humans kept choosing themselves. Reed watched as years of careful diplomacy crumbled in hours. Species that had celebrated humanity's victory over the gods now saw humans as a bigger threat than the ethereals had ever been. The final blow came when Cain released all the hostages. He didn't kill anyone. He didn't need to. The damage was done. "This has been educational," Cain announced as his ships prepared to leave. "But this is just the beginning. The galaxy now knows what humans really are. Let's see how they respond." As Cain's fleet departed, Reed stood among the wreckage of human diplomacy. Alien delegates were evacuating as quickly as possible. Emergency transmissions were already going out to their home worlds. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be trusted. Within hours, 3 species had recalled their ambassadors. Within days, trade agreements were being canceled. Within a week, several alien governments had begun discussing a defensive alliance, not against the ethereals this time. Against humanity. Cain had won. He had turned humanity's greatest allies into their greatest enemies. The real war was about to begin, and humanity would be fighting alone. Reed realized with growing horror that Cain might have been right all along. Maybe humans really were monsters, and maybe the galaxy was right to fear them. 6 months after the Unity Point massacre, the galaxy was at war again. Reed stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching enemy ships fill the space around Kepler Colony. But these weren't ethereal vessels. They were ships from 12 different alien species, all united by one goal: destroy humanity before humanity destroyed them. "Incoming transmission," reported Park. "It's the Velkari fleet commander." The hologram showed Ambassador Vec, the same alien who had once thanked humanity for killing the gods. Now his ceremonial robes were replaced by military armor. "Commander Reed," Vec said, his voice filled with sadness. "We take no pleasure in this war, but humanity has shown its true nature. You are too dangerous to exist alongside peaceful species." Reed wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words. In 6 months, humanity had become everything Cain said. They were. Colonies were arming themselves against alien neighbors. Human military commanders were talking about preemptive strikes and necessary aggression. The same species that had freed the galaxy was now preparing to conquer it. "We don't want this war," Reed said. "Neither did we," Vec replied. "But Cain showed us what happens when we trust predators." The transmission ended. Immediately, the alien fleet opened fire. Reed had fought many battles, but this was different. These aliens weren't trying to conquer humanity. They were trying to survive humanity. Their attacks were desperate, terrified, like animals fighting for their lives. The battle raged for hours. Human ships were better armed, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Reed watched his fleet slowly being torn apart by beings who had once called them heroes. "Sir," Davis called out, "we're being hailed by another human ship. It's Cain." Reed's blood froze. "Put him through." Cain's face appeared on the screen. He was aboard a human battleship, but Reed could see alien prisoners in the background. Kane had been capturing enemy soldiers and conducting his experiments on them. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Kane said, watching the battle. "Humanity at war again. This is what we were meant for, Commander. Not peace, not diplomacy. War." "You started this war," Reed accused. "I revealed this war," Kane corrected. "It was always coming. The moment humans killed their first god, this was inevitable. You can't have apex predators and prey species living in the same galaxy." Reed realized Kane was right. Even without Kane's interference, this war would have happened eventually. Humanity was too powerful, too aggressive, too willing to do anything to survive. The other species would have noticed eventually. "So what now?" Reed asked. Kane smiled. "Now we finish what we started. We don't just defeat them, Commander. We prove that we're the only species that deserves to inherit the galaxy. I won't be part of genocide." "You already are," Kane said. "Every alien ship you've destroyed today, every colony you've defended, every choice you've made to save humans, instead of aliens. You're already proving my point." Reed looked around his bridge. His crew was human. His loyalty was to humanity. When forced to choose between human and alien lives, he had chosen human every time. Kane was right. Reed was exactly the monster Kane said he was. "There is another way," Kane continued. "Join me. Embrace what we are. Stop pretending to be heroes and accept that we're predators. Together, we can end this war quickly and establish humanity as the galaxy's dominant species." Reed thought about it. Kane's way would mean fewer human deaths. It would mean victory. It would mean survival. It would also mean becoming everything he had fought against. "No," Reed said quietly. Kane's smile faded. "Then you'll die as a hypocrite instead of living as an honest monster." The transmission ended. Kane's ship turned and began attacking both alien and human vessels. He was no longer fighting for humanity. He was fighting for his vision of what humanity should become. Reed made his decision. "All ships," he broadcast on an open channel that every vessel in the system could hear. "This is Commander Reed of the UES Defiance. I'm activating a quantum disruptor bomb. Anyone who wants to live has 30 seconds to get clear." "Sir?" Davis asked in shock. "That will destroy the entire system, including us." "Including us," Reed confirmed. Park spun around. "Commander, we can win this battle. Our reinforcements are only hours away." "And then what?" Reed asked. "We win this battle, then the next one, then the next one. We keep proving that humans are monsters until we really become monsters, or we stop here." Reed activated the quantum disruptor, the same technology that had killed gods. But this time he was aiming it at a star. "Commander Reed," came a transmission from Vec. "What are you doing?" "Ending this war the only way I can," Reed replied. Kane was right about one thing. Humans are predators, but he was wrong about something else. Predators can choose not to hunt. The disruptor charged, preparing to tear apart the system's star. When it exploded, it would destroy every ship in the area, human and alien alike. "You're committing suicide," Kane's voice crackled over the comm. "I'm making a choice," Reed replied. "The same choice you've been forcing everyone else to make. But this time, I'm choosing to save them instead of saving us." Around the system, alien ships began retreating. They understood what Reed was doing. He was sacrificing himself and his entire fleet to prevent the war from spreading. "This won't end the war," Kane said. "No," Reed agreed. "But it might change how people remember it. Maybe they'll remember that some humans chose sacrifice over survival." The disruptor reached full charge. Reed looked at his crew. They could have overridden his order, stopped the detonation, saved themselves. Instead, they stood at their posts ready to die. Maybe Kane was wrong. Maybe humans weren't just monsters. Maybe they were capable of something more. "For what it's worth," Reed broadcast to the fleeing alien ships, "I'm sorry, we were supposed to be better than this." The disruptor fired. The star began to collapse. In the final moments, Reed thought about the war against the gods. Humanity had won that war through determination, ingenuity, and ruthless efficiency. They had proved they could kill anything, even divinity itself. But they had never proved they could choose not to kill. Reed smiled as the light consumed everything. Maybe that was enough. Maybe choosing to die instead of becoming monsters was the most human thing of all. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems. When the news spread, the galactic war began to slow. Some species remembered that the last human fleet had chosen sacrifice over victory. Others remembered that humans were still the species that had killed gods. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity's legacy would forever be written in the stars. They were the species that could destroy anything, even themselves.